Mr. President, from well before the establishment of the United Nations or the State of Israel, the Palestinians' goal has been clear: the annihilation of the Jews. Al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and one of the founding fathers of Palestinian nationalism, worked hand in hand with Hitler to achieve this. And from then until today, the root of this conflict has not changed. It is not a political conflict or about partitioning land. It is solely about the destruction of Israel and the murder of Jews. Yet today, the UN refuses to see this, or prefers to act like an ostrich, burying its head in the ground out of distorted political interest. We just heard some of these political interests being expressed here on this stage. The UN was established in the wake of World War II to prevent atrocities such as the Holocaust. But the same genocidal ideology that this body was founded to combat is still prevalent among the Palestinians. What the Palestinians are indoctrinated with through their official media channels even, and what they are brainwashed with in their schools and educational materials is no different than the anti-Semitic propaganda in Nazi Germany's Der Stürmer. That's what they learn. You have to be blind not to see it. We all saw it in live action on October 7th when Hamas carried out their massacre. Hamas publicly states their affiliation with genocidal Jew hatred, and Hitler's Mein Kampf, his book, was found in many houses in Gaza. But you know, it's not only Hamas. Fatah and the Palestinian Authority refuse to recognize Israel's rights to exist as a Jewish state because they share the same genocidal ideology. President Abbas not only has not even condemned the October 7th massacre, the Palestinian Authority is paying monthly salaries to all the terrorists that took part in the October 7th massacre. All of them. The Palestinian terrorists, whether in Gaza or in Ramallah, seek one thing: the destruction of Israel, full destruction. Yet the UN, the organization founded to prevent Nazi ideology from spreading, has committed itself to reinforcing modern-day Nazi jihadists. And today, breaking the Guinness World Record for rewarding terror, the UN now is in complete violation of its charter, is considering to force the establishment of a Palestinian terror state. Yes, to force it. This won't be a regular state, I'm telling you. It will be a Palestynazi state. An entity that achieved statehood despite being committed to terror and Israel's annihilation. If Hitler was alive today, he would be singing the UN's praises. And colleagues, if this happens, the UN will be remembered as a body that has been hijacked by dictators and human rights violators, a body that rewards Nazi-like monsters. Colleagues, yesterday we commemorated 6 months to the October 7th massacre. 6 months. Hamas carried out the most heinous and widespread massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Entire families were wiped from the earth, and peaceful communities were turned to ash. Israeli women were the victims of systemic rape, and over 250 hostages were taken by Hamas to Gaza. We even have with us in this very room a delegation of wounded soldiers who courageously battled this sheer evil in Gaza. These are true heroes who fought in defense of our future, and I salute them. Yet today we are not meeting to condemn the Hamas's atrocities. We are not meeting to condemn Hamas. We are meeting here for the sole reason that certain members of the Security Council, and you heard them, refused to even accept a condemnation to child-murdering rapists, and they vetoed it. What a disgrace. In a sane world, uncorrupted by despicable political interests, today, 6 months after the gates of hell were opened upon innocent Israelis, the UN would be holding a vigil for the victims, an international conference to secure the release of the hostages. Resolutions would be passed condemning Hamas. The Security Council would meet to designate Hamas as the terror organization that it is and sanction any country that aids, arms, and harbors these terrorists. But sadly, we don't live in a sane world, and the UN is more morally corrupt than ever. 6 months have passed since the massacre, and not a single UN body, not even one, not the General Assembly, the Security Council, or any other UN organ has even condemned Hamas. And not even one meeting has been dedicated to our hostages. It's insane. 1,200 Israelis murdered in the most barbaric ways, slaughtered like vermin. 133 hostages being held for 6 months. 6 months being beaten, tortured, abused, and raped. Rockets are raining down on Israeli towns and cities every day now, forcing millions to rush back and forth, forced to bomb shelters. Yet, to the UN, Israeli suffering means nothing. Nothing. Can you imagine if your daughter was Noah Argamani or Naama Levi? Beautiful girls held hostage by terrorists for half a year, enduring unspeakable horrors. What if your son was Rom Breslavsky, a courageous hero who spent hours saving others at the Nova Festival, Peace Festival, before being taken hostage by Hamas, and he's still there? What if your father was Amiram Cooper, a loving grandfather who was violently abducted to Gaza? By the way, Amiram is 84 years old. What kind of monsters kidnap an 84-year-old man? And you are all here silent? These are all people with stories, lives, and loved ones. And the UN has done nothing, absolutely nothing to ensure their release. Nothing. Shame on you. This body has forgotten the UN's founding purpose. So I will remind you, as it says in Article 1 of the UN Charter, and I quote, "The purpose of the United Nations are to maintain international peace and security, and to that end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to peace and for the suppression of acts of aggression." Instead of removing threats, this body has spent the past 6 months pressuring threats and ignoring the gravest breach of peace: the innocent Israeli hostages held by rapist terrorists. You know that the Red Cross has not even visited them? Can you imagine? You did not establish a reporting mechanism for them. You did not demand that the Secretary General present a weekly outline of what he has done to advance their release. You have done zero. Zero. Why is this body so morally distorted? None of the resolutions adopted in this hall or in the Security Council conditioned a ceasefire on the release of the hostages. And it's clear why. Sorry again for the language. You don't give a damn about the Israeli hostages or Israeli lives at all. 6 months, and all the UN focuses on is the situation in Gaza and a ceasefire. Zero action has been taken for the sake of the hostages. Zero. And 100% dedication to aiding the mobs of Gazans who supported the Hamas Nazis and celebrated. We saw them, how they celebrated the kidnapping while publicly beating and spitting on the victims who were brought to Gaza. A ceasefire with no conditions is the UN's assurance that Hamas can regroup, rearm, and recommit October 7th, just as they have vowed to do. It is very telling that the first parties to praise the Security Council ceasefire resolution were, surprise, surprise, Hamas and the Ayatollah regime in Tehran, the number one state sponsor of terrorism. Because your policy is giving a carte blanche to genocidal jihadists. This is how low the UN has fallen. Colleagues, 6 months since the massacre, there are no vigils. There are no condemnations of Hamas, and the Security Council is busy, right now, busy discussing the recognition of a Palestyna state instead of designating Hamas as a terror organization. This will be the vilest reward of the vilest crimes. The Security Council is deliberating, granting the perpetrators and supporters of October 7th full membership status in the UN. We just heard it. The very fact that this discussion is even being held is already a victory for genocidal terror. Following 9/11, could anyone fathom giving Al-Qaeda international legitimacy and status? What's the next step? Considering the Islamic State, ISIS, for UN membership? 6 months after Hamas invaded Israel to rape, murder, and devastate, an atrocity 20 times bigger than 9/11, the UN sends a clear message to all the jihadist terrorists in the Palestinian Authority and around the world. Commit massacres and atrocities, and the UN will consider your demands, no matter how radical they are. What kind of sick, twisted logic is this? If the Security Council chooses to advance this prize for barbarism, it is no longer deserves to be called the Security Council. It shall forever be known as the Terror Council. Throughout history, there has been no greater reward for evil. Colleagues, let me remind everyone, the basic requirements for admission to the UN are A, permanent population, B, defined government, defined territory, C, government, and D, capacity to enter relations with other states. And a very important principle that was stated in Article 4 of the UN Charter is, and I quote, membership in the United Nations is open to all peace-loving states. Peace-loving. Nothing is clearer than the fact that the Palestinians failed to meet these criteria. The Palestinian Authority has absolutely no control over Gaza. You all know it. In 2007, after Gazans voted Hamas terrorists into power, Hamas proceeded to hunt down and murder every representative of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, throwing some off rooftops in public executions. But even in Judea and Samaria, entire neighborhoods and cities are ruled by other terrorist gangs, and the Palestinian Authority, ironically, has no authority. While this in itself is grounds enough to reject this seek reward for Palestinian terror, the Palestinian Authority is itself the antithesis of a peace-loving entity. You know it, again. President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority not only, as I said, have not condemned the attack, they are also paying monthly salaries to all the terrorists that took part in the October 7th massacre. This is a genocide-loving entity that doesn't deserve any status here. Neither this body nor the Security Council wishes to combat the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is that what's needed is demilitarization and de-radicalization of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, just as was done in Germany after the fall of the Nazis. And until the Palestinians' culture of hate does not cease, there is no possibility for any solution. And after October 7th, this is a non-negotiable demand for Israel, the de-radicalization of the Palestinian society. Stop their culture of hate. Colleagues, for many years, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, has been paying terrorists for their murderous terror attacks. This is not customary. It is Palestinian legislation. According to the Palestinian law, Palestinian terrorists are paid monthly salaries for murdering Israelis. Internalize it. These salaries can reach thousands of dollars each month, and they are on a rising scale. The longer the prison sentence you get, the higher the salary. You murdered more Jews, you get more money. This is the Palestinian Authority's despicable pay-for-slay act. Read it. Peace-loving indeed. Maybe in this morally bankrupt organization, I don't know. To conclude, the family of every Hamas terrorist killed on October 7th and since will begin receiving monthly payments, along with all the terrorists that Israel has arrested since October 7th. This is a pure incentive to murder Israelis, and it is continuing as we speak, as you contemplate giving terrorists a state. And one last reason why not to support their request. Granting the Palestinian statehood is not only a blatant violation of the UN Charter, it also violates the fundamental principle of reaching a lasting solution at the negotiating table. It is a clear message to the Palestinians that their constant rejectionism and boycotting of negotiations paid off. There is nothing that perpetuates a conflict more than one side believing that they can force their demands on the other side through a third party, which is the UN. And this is exactly what the UN's discussion to unilaterally grant the Palestinians a state does. It perpetuates the conflict. This is what this institution has been doing for years, sadly. From even before the rebirth, before the UN was born, before it was established, the Arabs refused to accept the notion of a Jewish state in any borders. We saw this after the Peel Commission in 1937, after the UN's partition plan here in 1947, that was rejected by the Palestinians, after Camp David in 2000, after Prime Minister Olmert's offer in 2008, and in relation to the Obama initiative in 2014 and Trump's deal of the century in 2020. Each time a peace plan was tabled, the Palestinians' response was to reject it outright. This is not because the offers were not generous. They were. This is because the offers included the existence of Israel. And to the Palestinians, the only solution is a solution where the Jewish state ceases to exist. But instead of pressuring them to negotiate, to come to terms with Israel's existence, the UN prefers to take a unilateral approach, to cast away the negotiating table and ram a Palestinian state down Israel's throat. This is not how you resolve a conflict, friends. This is how you ensure more bloodshed, more violence, and many more October 7th. You all remember it. After Israel withdrew and disengaged from Gaza in 2005, Hamas turned every inch of the Strip into an Iranian terror stronghold. We will not accept the same thing to happen in Judea and Samaria, what you call the West Bank. Never. An agreement can be agreed upon only at the negotiating table, not by forcing it unilaterally here. Israel, dear friends, achieved peace. We achieved peace with Egypt, with Jordan, with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco. It was achieved through dialogue, through negotiations, not because it was forced by a third party. The UN, sadly, has been sabotaging peace in the Middle East for years. Mr. President, 6 months have passed since Hamas's genocidal ideology became a reality. Yet rather than condemn the terrorists, the UN seeks to reward them. This is the UN's lowest moment, a moment of shame, disgrace, and complete moral bankruptcy. This is a moment that will never be forgotten. Thank you.